Welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of the Shared Practices Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lowe, and we have our new co-host, George. Welcome back to the podcast after last week.
Thanks, Richard. It's really nice to be here.
Well, it's kind of fun that the episodes lined up this way because you know Cameron and actually Cameron's little brother. So this interview is with Dr. Cameron Stroyan, who's a mutual friend of ours, went to Midwestern, and had a unique experience recently. He, because of the podcast, and we'll get into it, moved towards ownership a little sooner. And that, I thought that was awesome. And we actually talked with it, and he kind of called me through the whole process. And through this process, he hired someone that said they were going to do everything for him. They were going to do the valuation. They were going to do the negotiation. They were going to follow through with all these different things. And it didn't turn out quite like he had hoped. And he paid a little more than he would have liked. He felt kind of burned. So he wanted to express some of that frustration. And the takeaway that I got, and you tell me, George, if you felt like you got anything else from this. The takeaway that I got was that if you hire one person to do everything, that makes me hesitate. What do you feel about that?
I'm completely with you, Richard. I really think this episode shows that point. And also, it's a great episode for somebody to listen to. Very common situation where somebody's an associate and is thinking about buying into the current office that they're in. It's kind of an interesting situation because the owner has all of the leverage kind of in that transaction because they currently own the office. So it's definitely a great episode to listen to, especially for those associates who are thinking about buying a portion of the office that they're in. Awesome.
Okay, cool. Let's dive in. We have with us today Dr. Cameron Stroyan, also known as DJ Destroyan from YouTube fame and Facebook fame. How many views have you had on your combined YouTube and Facebook videos in total, Cameron?
Oh gosh, so many to count. I just can't.
You just can't keep count. Just all those views, just flowing.
The dent shop definitely did the best.
I'm so pumped up pepper tooth like a real dog. Decaying your teeth is so damn nasty. The dentist like, whoa, must have eat too much candy. Drilling in hella deep, that's a big cavity. Probably should have brushed your teeth. Now it's a catastrophe.
The best, it has about 100,000, but the rest are hovering around 10 to 15,000 usually.
Drill it, fill it, and polish it. About to go and check the margin in. Passing through that floss again, making sure that it's hardening. It's dent shop, baby. Won't confuse you with the jargon. Save you
for dental music videos, you're pretty much the top of the field. I mean, you're famous at this point. So from here, it's only downhill. I mean, I don't know how you're going to top yourself.
I guess so. I'll have to think of something.
You'll have to think of something. So Cameron is a classmate of mine. We graduated together. And Cameron, instead of studying, decided that he would make parody videos of like 20 different songs, if you include all the little ones, during dental school, and would get our student body together, make these videos, and then we'd publish them online. And then the school would shut him down because he was filming on campus, and then copyright people would shut him down. The man is always pushing you down, Cameron. How do you feel about that?
Yes. That was the most frustrating part because I felt, as a student, I would love to see this type of camaraderie and just having fun.
It was the
with
best.
The classmates. Yeah.
It's like the best advertising Midwestern could have had, and they turned it down. They didn't want it.
Yep. They shut it down.
We'll put some links in the podcast show notes. So Dent Shop, which is a parody of Thrift Shop, is by far my favorite.
I'ma take your grandpa's crowns. I'ma take your grandpa's crowns. No, for real. Ask your grandpa, can I have a silver crown? Oral exam showed a lot of teeth missing, plus some leftover roast beef that I found digging. You had a broken canine, I broke another canine. You chose me with a burr, I can't even draw a straight line. Hello.
So that's not why we're having you on today. We are having you on to talk about something that people have asked me about. They've asked about doing a partnership, and partnerships get all these. They can be really good, they can be really bad. It's hard to do them. People get screwed, or sometimes someone's an associate, and then the owner doesn't want to actually sell, and they string them along, and they have all these problems. So you have recently, or not even fully finished, you are in the process of wrapping up
couple weeks,
yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, wrapping up a partnership right now. And I wanted you to talk through your story, your experience. So from graduation, how you found this job, how you figured out it was a good fit, and then when you decided to pull that partnership trigger. And then you've had some ups and downs through the little transition period here. So I wanted to explore the lessons you've learned from your experience. So you graduated in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you now, and how did you find this place?
So right now, as of February 1st, I'm officially a 50-50 partner.
Hey.
So it has been about, I guess, 20 days into it so far. It hasn't really sunk in because I haven't had to pay any bills and haven't received a paycheck yet. So nothing's really changed yet, but I'm sure that will soon take full effect here. So that's basically where we're at.
What city and state are you in right now?
So I am in Puyallup, Washington, which is about 45 minutes south of Seattle.
And how big is Puyallup? How do you even say that name?
Puyallup.
Puyallup.
Yep.
Like you got to puke all up on someone.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Hopefully not.
No.
So I think there's about 50,000 people in the city.
But it's kind
of
a suburb.
Everything's all blended together with Seattle, this area. So, it's all interconnected by different freeways and such. So pretty close to Seattle.
How close is this to where you grew up?
So my hometown, this is in Western Washington, near the ocean, and I'm from Eastern Washington, so it's about 6 hours from my hometown.
Okay. So how did you find this associateship when you graduated?
So I'm a little unique in that
a little
a little bit. So the partner that I'm with now, I actually met him. He used to live in my hometown, a little town of about 2,200 people over in Eastern Washington. It's a little farm town in Eastern Washington. So he did the community health scholarship, where you give 3 years of service and they help pay back your loans at least for however many years you put in. So he did that, and he did the rural community scholarship in my hometown is where he lived, practiced about 20 minutes away from my hometown. But he used to live on the golf course that I worked at during the summers of my undergrad. So I got to know him, found out he was a dentist, and started shadowing him, and that's how we met at first.
And if you don't feel comfortable sharing financials, that's totally fine. And I don't want Jenny beating me up. So how were you doing when you got there at first? You were always super fast in dental school. You had good hand skills. You were confident. You could present treatment. Patients liked you. So you're one of those, top 10% producer type guys. So how were you doing when you got out of dental school at his practice?
Yeah, so I got super lucky. So Ryan, the other dentist that I work with, he did the community health scholarship, like I said. So during his time there, he got like some insane amount, like $20,000, $25,000 a year to spend on CE. So he spent all of that on implants and sedation dentistry. So he took the course down in California. I can't remember the name of it, but he's fully IV certified. And basically he's an oral surgeon, but a general dentist.
Okay.
So he basically focuses on implants and wisdom teeth. That's about all he does. So it actually worked out very well for both of us, because the day I came in, he started switching over to full oral surgery, and I took over his general dentistry population. So I had a full schedule from day one, basically.
Okay. So you're kind of running the restorative practice, the bread and butter, crown and bridge, restorative, checking the hygiene. So you're like the regular general dentist there, and he's like a pseudo specialist that jumps between these two offices.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty sweet gig. So that means that like you basically got handed a full patient flow of a well-oiled machine of a practice. And so you were able to just crank to just work.
Yeah. And on top of that, the other dentist cut off one day. So he switched to 3 days. So I took even more of his patients. So, I mean, I was book solid from the day I started. So I got really lucky in that aspect. I don't think that's very, very common, but it worked out very well for me.
Do you know what you produced year one of that first 6 months of working there?
Yeah, so I had, in my contract, I negotiated, I know most people have a minimum daily amount, and then, or the 30% of production is what I got. So I got offered $800 per day, essentially,
Nice.
or 30% of production. And I thankfully never once had to take the daily minimum. So it worked out. It worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. So the paying down or stressing about student loans has not been an issue for you. And
not necessarily. I mean, that number is always in the back of my head. I mean,
still, it's looming.
My student loan was about 400. I was about 400 grand in debt, I think.
Okay.
380, something like that. So that monthly payment, I mean, it's a burden, but not necessarily anything to worry about.
Okay. So things were going well and producing, learning. At what point did you guys start talking about a partnership? And did you do anything up front in terms of like, yeah, down the road we could be partners? Or was it talked about up front at all?
Yeah. So I told you earlier that I met with all three of these dentists in the winter of my D4 year. I talked about with all three of them the fact that I wanted to be, at least part owner. Eventually, I didn't want to just be an associate my whole life. So that was up front. We both agreed to that. We said about a year trial, make sure everything's working out, make sure I like the fit, make sure he likes the fit, make sure I like the area, make sure my wife likes the area.
Sure.
Just, a good trial period for about a year, and then get serious about buying into the practice. So, once that year hit, we finally started getting serious. I mean, I was pretty comfortable, honestly, where I was at. So I was like, oh, gosh, I don't know about this whole process. I mean, there's a lot more responsibility that comes with being an owner. I mean, I'm making good money as an associate. And then that's about the time your podcast really started. So it made me really think about, the benefits of being an owner. And I was very grateful for that because it really kind of pushed me to pursue the partnership.
Cool. Well, so that would have been like last August, September then is when you started getting serious about the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay. So at that point, you're like, okay, let's do the partnership thing. How does this work? Actually, I remember you called me and sent me a message and you're like, okay, I want to do this partnership thing. What do I do? And I was like, I don't know. Let's figure this out. So you reached out to some people that are kind of like transition people. So I'll let you talk about your experience. Okay, we're back this week with Dr. Paul Johnson on the things that you can invent and do with the Form 2 printer.
And I was just brainstorming one night and I started thinking of the ISO-Lite is such a great product and consumables are kind of an issue. Like with bite blocks, I thought I use them a lot in surgery and it's nice that you can just reuse them, you can sterilize them. The only problem is you don't have any suction. So I designed a very sophisticated bite block and I called it the Spit Be Gone. And essentially it has a high vac in the bite block. I designed it to fit my mouth because I was the only person available to test it out at the time I was designing it. Threw it into the 3D printer and the next day I had a working prototype. I plugged it into the high vac system and it worked like a charm. Within 24 hours I went from idea to working product. I love that.
What was that like to switch from that old model of printing to SLA with the Form 2?
The drama of pushing print and knowing that you will get a print and it will be a good quality print. There's no drama with the Form 2. I love it. It's the fact that I can, when I designed a FDM part and I wasn't sure if I would be able to print it and it might take about 3 or 4 tries to print it. It's just like it's night and day. It's really fun now to print and not have that drama of worrying if your print would work or not.
If you're curious about all the things that a Form 2 can do for you in your dental office, go to formlabs.com/shared practices. There's actually a button there that says request a free sample. If you click that button, it pulls up a menu of all the different materials you can print on the Form 2, including dental surgical guide resin. By ordering any of those samples, you're actually supporting the show by showing Formlabs that people are listening and willing to take action. So go to formlabs.com/shared practices and request a free sample. I'll let you talk about your experience.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on my own. Dentaltown, as you know, has a ton of great resources. So I started researching, tons of posts on buying in, partnerships, all sorts of things, and just, for about a few weeks straight, just read and took some CE courses. There's a lot of good stuff on Dentaltown that I was reading. So then I'm like, I have no idea where to even start here. None of this really walks you through the process, which hopefully is the whole idea of this podcast.
Right.
So I said, I don't know where to start. A lot of people recommended getting an attorney, and that's a good place to start. So I reached out to an attorney. There's some, I did a lot of research on finding an attorney. My practice consultant that the other owner uses gave me some recommendations. So I talked to a few of them, probably about 8 different attorneys, got some quotes.
Okay.
And then I researched a lot on Dentaltown, and there was one particular attorney that got a lot of really good reviews. So I ended up using him.
Okay.
So I reached out to him and said, what do I need to do to get the ball rolling here? What had happened, so Ryan, the dentist I work with, he uses a practice consulting firm, and they had written, once we finally officially said, okay, well, let's do this, he wrote an LOI, a letter of intent. So that's kind of when it first started getting real here.
It's like the offer on the table.
The offer, it had a number out there and kind of the intent of what our partnership was. And the whole time we had been talking about a partnership, but I didn't know anything about the numbers or anything there. So
do you know
his number? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and like I said, you're still wrapping this up, and if you don't feel comfortable talking about numbers, just tell me. But do you know what the practice was producing when you first got there versus what it was producing by the time or collecting by the time you started this process?
Yeah, so 2014, they did about, that was the year that he bought the practice from his uncle.
Okay.
So before then, they were only doing about $1 million a year.
Okay.
With his uncle by himself. And then my partner Ryan brought in, and they did that first year. I think it was, off the top of my head, I think it was about 2.4 million. So huge increase there.
Yeah. Well, and he's basically like an oral surgeon on top of that GP practice.
Yes. So then, it was 1.7 million.
Okay.
And 2.4 million the next year. And that's kind of when I bought in. Or that's when I started. So the next year we did about 2.7 million.
Okay.
But before we even got into this, we started and agreed that, we'd take, the collections from the day I started until the day I wanted to buy in and kind of average those two.
Okay.
Because we kind of thought that was fair for both of us. So
you had that understanding up front. You kind of had a little bit of that conversation on the front end.
Yeah. To factor in, the growth that I accounted for, hopefully.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, so then he gives you the LOI, which, just going back to that point, that's huge because I think most people don't have that conversation. And then when they try and buy in later down the road, then the owner wants them to buy in at the higher price, or price becomes this big arguing point. So it's awesome that you had the foresight and you'd read on Dentaltown and you'd talk to other people to kind of have that conversation. And Ryan is just seems like a good guy. Like he's not out to screw anyone. And that's why you're partnering with him, because he's a good guy. And so things looked like they were going to start to work out with the partnership. So he gives you the LOI. It's got a big number on there, and you've got to pay half of what the practice is now doing, which, oh man, if it's 2.7 million, I don't know what percentage of collections you guys settled at, but it's a big amount that you're getting a loan for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is it over $1 million or under $1 million?
It's over. Well, I'll be honest. I'll tell you the number. So what had happened was, I guess from the day I started at 2.4 till the day I bought in, it was about 2.95.
Okay.
So what we did was took the average of that, and then essentially from what my attorney gave me, about 85% of collections is the average price of what a practice is sold for.
Okay.
So we kind of took the average of those two numbers, and then 85% of half of that is what
Was
I
there
bought.
was there any additional analysis of like the market value? Like, 85%, sure, that might be nationwide, but was that 85% specific for your market, or did he look at the profitability of anything? Like, was there a valuation done of what is this cash flow worth at this practice?
Yeah, so that was one of the more frustrating things for me, because I all along this process, I thought we were going to have this formal valuation done, and they were going to go over the numbers and say, this is a fair price for both of you. We have some arbitrary, valuator doing this valuation. And my attorney the whole time was, saying, no, we don't need that. This is pretty standard here. This is what we need to do, and gave me this number. So I kind of just had that number in the back of my mind the whole time.
Okay.
And I had no idea, to be honest, if that was fair or not. So
okay.
That's kind of, yeah.
Well, and so I just did an interview like 2 hours ago with Matt Porter. We talked a little bit about valuation. He said, I would rather that someone maybe a little bit overpay for a really good cash flowing practice than get a really good deal on a crappy practice, because a good deal on a crappy practice is still a crappy practice.
Yeah.
So the fact that maybe you could have like haggled or done a valuation or, changed it or lowered it, but it seems like Seattle's a good market. You're not like in the middle of nowhere. And so it would be a higher demand ratio of collections. And it also seems like it's a pretty profitable practice. Do you know what the overhead percentage on the practice is?
Yeah, so it's really good. The overhead's only about 51%.
Holy cow.
So, I mean, it's really low overhead.
So
I will, spoiler alert, I will tell you, I was shooting for 85%. The final, after all the negotiating, ended up being about 93% of that collection number. So it was 85% wasn't necessarily what I ended up paying. So
okay. But it was the starting
higher,
point.
but I mean, honestly, it ended up being a great deal, I think, for both of us. So I was still happy with that number.
Okay, cool. Well, and it's, I mean, in reality, if you'd done some crazy complex valuation and it had been lower than 85% of collections in the end, it sounds like your partner wanted you to buy in at 93,
yeah. He wouldn't have sold it for anything lower than what I gave him. So
right. So
it worked out.
Even though you didn't get your, in-depth gutting it and looking at all the financials type valuation, it was kind of a negotiating point, and maybe you got a little bit better than what your partner initially wanted. But so how did that go down? Was the LOI higher than that final number?
Yeah. So the number that he proposed in his LOI was 1.3 million for 50%.
Okay.
And then according to the valuation that I actually created it on my own. My attorney kind of just agreed with my valuation, because I started halfway through 2015, because we graduated in May of 2015. Sure. I started on July 1st.
Okay. So
I took the collections at the end of 2014 and the end of 2015. And since I started halfway through, I just averaged those. So that gave me one number, basically what I call the starting point.
Okay.
From when I started. And then at the end of January 31st of 2016, I took that number of collections, and then I kind of averaged those two numbers and took 85% of that. So that gave me 1.1 million.
Okay.
And then his offer was 1.3 million. After some negotiating, he was not willing to sell for 1.3 million whatsoever.
Or 1.1.
Or 1.1 million.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. And we ended up coming to agreement at 1.23 million.
Okay. So you negotiated down. So your attorney didn't do the valuation, which it seemed like you kind of were thinking that he was going to.
Yes.
And then did you have to do the negotiations on that price? Were you kind of going back and forth with Ryan on your own?
So that was probably, honestly, the most frustrating part about the whole process, because up front, I did all this research, found what I thought was the best attorney that dentistry has to offer. I did a ton of research, And he told me before I signed, the retainer for him that, he was going to make up for his higher price by completing the transaction a lot quicker than anyone else could.
Okay.
A, and then B, doing all of the price negotiating for me. And on neither of those did he follow through, unfortunately. So it was pretty frustrating. I had to do all of the negotiating myself. And I'm not good at that at all.
So what was that like? What happened?
I mean, me and Ryan, we're great friends. We live, basically across the street from each other. Our wives are best friends. We each have a couple kids that hang out together all the time. So I just go over to his house one night, and I called you the night. I mean, I was on my drive over there when I called you that night. And just kind of, because my attorney wasn't giving me any advice, so I'm like, maybe Richard will have advice.
I can't even remember. Did I give you any advice? Did it?
Yeah, no, you gave some good advice. I mean, whether or not it benefited me or not, he was pretty set on his number. So
okay.
It was kind of frustrating because I thought, I assumed all this was happening behind the scenes. My attorney, his attorney are talking about
going to bat for you.
Yeah. And I ended up having to do this all on my own. And he's very strong-willed, and I'm kind of a coward when it comes to arguing and negotiating. So I kind of, I get that one. So it wasn't a very pleasant experience. But, I mean, I was still happy at the end.
It's not like you have any leverage either. I mean, that's the hard part, I guess, about being an associate at a practice and wanting to buy in is kind of they've built this thing from the ground up. They took the risk. They brought you on. They trained you, and you don't have another offer somewhere else that you could go. Like it's like, no, I want what you have, and you have the control of it. So
yes,
there's no negotiation that you can really do, other than saying, well, no, I think this is the valuation because of this, this, and this, and he can say, well, I don't care what you think. So that's hard.
Yeah, and in the end, I mean, he's going to be losing money in the long term by having me as a partner, but I mean, he gets a lot of money up front, which is a huge benefit, and he can use that in other areas.
He can cash out now.
Yeah, but he's going to be, sharing the profits with me, ultimately going to take a hit on this. So he had no necessarily reason to sell other than, we were good friends, and he kind of honored the agreement that we had beforehand.
So that's even a worse negotiating position there. So he didn't need your money, but because he's nice, then he'll let you buy in, but you still have to negotiate because you're taking out a loan for over $1 million. So you want to feel like it's fair and that you're not getting screwed, that you're not overpaying. So man, that's hard. I can't imagine having to like sit across the dinner table or on his couch in his own home. And like, what do you say? Like, what happened?
It was pretty funny because my wife and I go over, and we have an 11-month-old girl.
Okay.
And they have 2 kids. One's 3 and one's 1. So the kids are screaming this whole time. We're like trying to negotiate, like on the couch while we're sitting there. These kids are screaming. The girls go upstairs, and I mean, it was very kind of awkward because the girls knew what was going on.
Oh man!
And it got a little bit heated, not necessarily because I mean it was very civil. We were both respect each other, but
it's a tense moment.
Time, it was very tense. So it was just kind of awkward especially doing that with a really close friend.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think that's why people are so hesitant about partnerships in general, and because it gets very emotional very quick, because it's someone that you care about. And if things go south or it gets hairy or something goes wrong in the future, like your lives are completely intertwined. I mean, you're like married to 2 people now. And so it's, I don't envy you, but you survived. You did it.
Yeah. And the good thing I had going for me was that, I mean, I had known this guy for 7-8 years. So, I mean, we'd been good friends and kept in touch and knew that, we got along great and that our families got along great. And, I wasn't doubting that for a second.
Cool. Okay. So you have the awkward conversation over screaming kids, and then Is that when he conceded down to the 1.23? Was it that night that you got to that final number, or how long did it take to get to that?
It was that night that we got down to that number.
So then you decided on the price. So now it's like, okay, we got the price down. Let's finish this up. So had you involved anyone else? Had you gotten a bank at this point? Had you gotten CPAs? Like, who all was involved in this whole process up to now?
Yeah, so Ryan, my partner, he used a local bank here and recommended them to me. And then my attorney recommended another bank. I mean, Bank of America. Obviously, they're a dental huge corporation.
Yeah, their dental lending division.
Lending division called Practice Solutions.
Right.
And they had by far the best rate at that time. So at the end of that year, I don't know how much truth there was to it, but they said I had to sign by December 31st
to lock in the rate.
Get a 1.9% rate for the first 3 years.
Okay.
And then it jumped up to 4.1 the next 7.
Okay.
And then there was a prepayment penalty after 3 years.
Before or after 3 years?
Before. So if you pay after 3 years, it's 3%. After 4 years, it's 2%. And after 5 years, it's 1%.
The prepayment penalty kind of goes down.
Yeah, it goes down every year. And then, so if you pay it all off after 5 years, there's no prepayment penalty.
Okay. Okay, cool.
But, so they say the blended rate on that, if you were just to do a 10-year loan, was 3.1%.
Okay.
And then the best offer I got from any local bank was 3.85. So
they were better. The rate was better.
Yes.
Other than the rate.
I can get into that later, but it was, I'm not sure if it ended up being worth it or not, but.
Okay. So at that point you were talking with his bank, you were talking with Bank of America. He had a consultant, it sounded like, that was kind of representing him or working with him. And, you know, he had all his numbers from his financials. So like, what kind of paperwork after the LOI, what was the next thing? Did you kind of counter offer and you signed like a formalized, like, what's the next thing called? I don't even know.
So I guess we had the LOI, and then my attorney, once we agreed on a number, edited it and proposed his own LOI. There were a couple other things that his consultant missed because it basically said, you know, the seller was leaving the practice. So he had to change a couple other little things here and there. So he made that new LOI with 1.23 million. So then we both signed that, and then it was kind of official, I guess, at that point. And then he had his own attorney other than the consultant.
Okay.
And I had my attorney. And then it was kind of who's going to write it. There's basically 2 contracts you have to fill out and sign. One is the operating agreement, which, you know, says who's going to do what, who gets paid what percentage. And then one is the purchase and sales agreement, which states, you know, this is the price, this is what's included in that price, you know, any fixed assets and all that. So there's 2 major contracts that have to be developed. So it was who's going to, you know, create these contracts. My attorney, I negotiated a flat rate up front. That was a significant flat rate, not something I was happy to pay, but regardless, I had this set fee that I had to pay either way. So I told him, well, I might as well have my attorney draft him, because otherwise your attorney is going to charge you per hour to create these documents.
Okay.
So I had him create those drafts, and it took quite a bit longer than I thought. Up front, he was telling me he thought we could have the whole deal done by January 1st. We had signed the LOI on, I think it was December 14th or 15th.
Okay.
And I thought that was a little ridiculous because everyone else I had talked to said it's going to take a month or 2 at least.
And it was the holiday season and everything.
Yeah, exactly. End of the year. And no, he said, you know, this is, you know, why you're paying a higher price to use us, because we're going to get it done quicker. And we're going to negotiate this price for you. Anyways, long story short, I didn't end up closing until February 1st. So clearly quite a bit longer than initially planned. And
that's usually, I mean, I feel like that's pretty typical that any large complicated transaction is going to have delays. It's just hard when someone says to you, oh, yeah, no, I got you. We can close by this date for sure. And then it doesn't happen. So it's kind of like, I think your expectations were one direction because they were very firmly stated. and then it didn't pan out how it had been promised.
I wouldn't have had a problem with the date if I wouldn't have been kind of told up front that it was going to be a lot quicker. That was kind of my main issue.
Okay. Another awesome feature of SpearEducation.com are these pathways that are a team meeting curriculum. So basically, rather than having to come up with training for your team, Spear Education has done that for you. This one features Dr. Frank Spear talking about something that is a little difficult to bring up yourself.
What we're going to talk about today is really can be one of the more challenging things to deal with in any practice, and that's money. And, the reality of life is we don't think about it, but we all have different beliefs about money. Everybody on our team might have a completely different belief about money. And so there's a group of what I'll call negative beliefs about money, and there's a group of what I might describe as positive beliefs about money. And I just want to share a few of those with you. And then I'm going to use a couple stories to illustrate how those beliefs play out in our practice, particularly as they relate to our patient interactions. So some examples of what I might consider a negative belief about money would be things like, well, my family's never had money.
Not all of us are comfortable talking about money with our team. By having Dr. Spear bring this up, it gives you a great starting point for a really productive team meeting. This can be a big deal for helping our team increase case acceptance by recommending treatment that maybe they couldn't afford themselves at this point in time. For access to this 5-course curriculum on finances in the dental practice, go to SpearEducation.com and get an extended guest pass trial when you mention the Shared Practices podcast. Use the promo code LOW200 for $200 off your annual membership when you're ready to pull the trigger. Was getting lending an issue? Because, the bank's going to lend you. Sometimes banks have like certain dollar values above which they kind of are less inclined to lend. And on a successful practice like this, I'm sure they had no problem. All the numbers made sense, and I'm sure you had great credit and great financials and all of that. Did you have any cash set aside, like liquid cash? Like savings?
I had liquid cash on my own savings. They didn't even, I guess both the application, I only ended up applying to 2 different banks because just after getting the initial rates that they quoted me, those were the 2 best that made sense. But both of them, the process was very quick. I filled out the application and my general finances and the finances of the practice, and I got pre-approved within a matter of days. That was pretty easy.
Okay, cool. So it looked like the lending was going to not be an issue. And you had the time to prove your ability to produce, and everything was just lining up. Okay, so lending looked like it was going to be good. Did things get delayed with lending at any point?
Yeah, so that was another frustrating part that I wish I would have known about ahead of time. So I went with Bank of America. The woman I was working with was very friendly. She seemed, very nice, knowledgeable. But there were forms and forms that she kept sending me over and over. Last minute, she'd say, I need this extra form here. Can you sign it? Fax it to me. This happened probably 20 times throughout the process during what was supposed to be the closing days of the agreement. So,
sure.
It was very frustrating in that Dr. Hanks, the dentist I work with, he said that he's the local bank. She came over one day, brought every single form over in person, reviewed them with him, had him sign them there with her, and that was it.
That's when he bought the practice in the first place.
Yeah, when he purchased it from his uncle.
Okay.
Whereas when I bought it through Bank of America financing, I'm working with a couple different people, and they just keep sending me all these different documents. They say, they're all personalized. We can't send it until we get this. And then when I get them, it's a very generic form that just has my name on it. So it was a little bit frustrating because I kind of thought that they could have, or felt like they could have sent all of these forms initially, and I could have just signed them all at the very beginning. It would have really streamlined the process. So that ended up ultimately the bank is what really delayed the process, because that took about a month longer than they said it would have.
And this was Bank of America was also the recommendation of your attorney, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there's any kickback there or what, but they came highly recommended through him, and they did have by far the best rate. So
Okay.
I mean, I can't really complain, but how much profit could I have made in that extra month if I would have closed a month sooner?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Okay. So lending didn't go perfectly. Oh, that also reminded me of your, actually, I'll make one point here. People typically say national dental lenders know what they're doing and therefore are better to go with. But it sounds like, and ironically, I've heard this from another dentist in Washington, like that's gotten very good rates and very good lending and very good service from a local bank in Washington. So I think one of the lessons here is to check out your local bank. And it still might be a lower rate to go with a national bank, but don't write off your local banks right up front. Yes. And know that if you have someone who's really motivated to help you and get it done, maybe that can get the deal done quicker, which might be more important than that rate necessarily for you, depending on the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And do your negotiating too, because the local bank I worked with initially quoted me at 4.2%. And then once I showed them the rate that Bank of America offered me, they dropped it to 3.85. So
cool.
I mean, there's quite a big difference there. I mean, it still was, they didn't quite match it, but I mean, they're a local bank. There's not a lot they can do in that regard.
Sure. Oh no, that's great. And that's an awesome point, is to, with any of these situations, to use one quote against the other and come back and say, hey, wait, I got this better terms or better rate. Can you match that? That's a great point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is there any other part of it that we haven't talked about that either was frustrating, or I know you talked about the contract of those two contracts that the attorney sent over. You felt like they weren't really customized, and I don't know if they're supposed to be customized, but you mentioned they kind of felt like a little boilerplate generic forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, the two contracts I sent, I mean, I read them, they're like 35, 40 pages, however long they are each. I mean, basically they looked like someone filled out a template of a generic contract, changed the names and dates. In fact, some of the names in there were actually from an existing
a previous
buyout.
client.
It looked like it had someone else's name in there.
But so it was dental though specific, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was dental specific.
Okay, so maybe that was their firm's standard contract that they use for partnerships.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But it just went to show me that I don't think it actually takes that much time to create these 40-page documents.
Well,
most of it's just filling out. I mean, the initial time they fill it out, yes.
Yeah, and that's what you're paying for, is that if down the road anything gets, negotiated or fought over, then they would go to bat, hopefully, over, using those terms that were in the contract that they set up in the first place, and they hopefully have structured it in your favor. But it sounds like this could have been used for a buyer or a seller. It's not like they negotiated any of the fine points within the contract. It was just the terms to protect both parties in general.
Yeah, and then a funny point about that was, so I sent my attorney's drafts to my partner's attorney, and he changed all sorts of wording. I mean, it was mostly wording issues. It was just it was actually pretty humorous reading the changes he made. Just he'd cross out one word and make it another word that didn't really matter what it said. So it was kind of funny reading that stuff. There was red marks all over it that didn't really change the content of the draft itself.
Man, attorneys make me nervous, because like in my mind, when I start thinking about that, I'm like, maybe that one word really mattered.
Well, in the end, my attorney ended up just basically recrossing all of those out and rewording it how he initially put it. So I'm not
so there was this weird little back and forth.
Yeah, there was a weird back and forth, and ultimately it was taking so long, and my partner was getting frustrated and just said, just have your attorney send over the final and I'll read it myself, and we'll sign it. We'll go over it ourselves.
Okay. So luckily Ryan wanted to get the deal done and wasn't going to freak out over these fine points, but it sounds like both him and his attorney were a little frustrated.
Yeah. And then you brought up a question about any other things along the process. A CPA is also someone along the process that needs to get involved to deal with the finances of the practice. So I did a lot of research. There's some names on Dentaltown that I thought about using that were, again, quite expensive. I ended up just going through Ryan, my partner's current CPA.
Okay.
He has a CPA that he uses and he really loves. Again, they're pretty expensive. I mean, it cost a few $1,000s just for their initial fee, and then their monthly charge is like $800 to review all the finances of the practice.
Okay.
So the price adds up pretty quickly, but I know nothing about the tax implications of the practice or owning a practice. So it's awesome to have someone there, and they've been very helpful so far. And that's just a local company that he uses in Washington here. So
okay, cool. So rather than you bringing your own CPA to the table and having his CPA go head to head with your CPA, you just kind of were like, okay, let's just get this done.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So there were some bumps along the way, and are you waiting for funding? Is that what you're still waiting on right now?
No, officially. So we signed the official contracts on February 1st because that was the day my bank said that he would be fully funded. So we signed those contracts anticipating that he would get the funding that day. And then about each day for the next week, they kept requesting more documents from us to be signed. And then it ended up not fully closing until February 7th. But as of February 7th, I mean, technically, I was half owner on February 1st. He didn't get his money until February 7th. But,
okay. So now everything's done. It's all official at this point, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Finally.
Ugh. So you are a part owner of this practice. You're a partner.
Yes.
How does that feel?
Feels weird to say that.
Is it weird?
And again, it hasn't quite sunk in yet because I haven't had any bills or got any paychecks yet. So we'll see how it feels next month.
And so how is that going to be different for you? Before you got, you were getting $800 a month or 30% of, was that production, adjusted production, collections? What were you getting before?
So I got 30% of adjusted production.
Okay.
We increased it to 35%. So each of us are getting 35%.
Okay.
Just to help, increase your productivity and, actually have a drive to produce.
You're so lazy. You need to be motivated.
Yeah, exactly. So we settled on 35. We thought that was fair for each of us. And then any profits at the end of that, and after paying all the other bills and salaries, are split 50-50. So,
and before you're saying the overhead was around 50%, just over 50%. So we're thinking like 15% profit and 7.5 goes to him, 7.5 goes 7 to you, 7 to him, something like that is probably what it's going to end up being.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go from,
I think it'll actually be a bit more than that, because his also factored in the financing of his loan for the practice. So
okay.
I think I'll benefit a little bit more than that even. So that'll help me.
Okay. And then I guess there's also the other doctor that you guys are both sharing some of the production from him as well.
And he gets paid 32% of production.
Okay.
But again, he's cut down to 3 days a week, and he's kind of checked out. Not necessarily. He still wants to be there, but he's only working one column now. We're each working 2 columns. He's more there just to kind of hang out, and he built this practice from scratch. So
sure,
he wants to see these people out. So
yeah, no problem. That's awesome. So you'll have to let us know by the time I release this. You hopefully will have gotten paid like once. So I'll have to ask you if what you got paid minus your loans was significantly more than what you were making before, or where you're at with that, because that's always something. Yeah, that's something you think about. Like, if I'm doing well as an associate here at this office, what am I going to be making as a partner? And you can kind of do those calculations in your head beforehand and project it out. But then when rubber hits the road, you kind of see, here's actual this month with the fluctuating production and the fluctuating bills and everything. This is what I actually took home.
Yep.
And then the other side of that is the tax implications. Now that you're going to have write-offs because you have this big loan that you purchased, and you can write some of that off, and you can allocate other things because of being an owner. So some of that you might not see until the tax season next year.
Exactly. And as we've learned through lots of your other podcasts, there are lots of tax benefits of being an owner.
Well, that's what I said. We'll see if it's actually true.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
I know, right? Well, hopefully some of the things that I've said come true. You'll be our test case, and we'll figure it out. So
I'll be the guinea pig for you, Richard.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Any other advice that you'd give to someone who is thinking about doing a partnership or hiring someone for a transition?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing, it has to work out for both of you. You have to get along. Partnerships, as a lot of you have probably heard, can be really good or they could be really bad. So I think a lot of them actually work out badly in the end, sadly. So, I mean, like I said, I've known Ryan for 7-8 years. We get along great. Our families get along great. We kind of knew all along that this was going to be, a good fit for both of us.
Sure.
So I wouldn't necessarily just jump into something, if you've only, just met the person and plan on doing this. This is something you should start. I started well before I even went to dental school.
Right.
So, partnerships aren't for everyone. And I realize that, but in my particular case, it worked out really well for both of us.
Well, thank you so much, Cameron, for coming on and sharing your experience. I know you were anxious to share both the good and the bad, and you learned some lessons and had some bumps, but it sounds like overall you've got this amazing opportunity. And even if you tried to screw it up, you would have had a hard time with it. So you did awesome. And I'm excited to hear where it goes from here.
Yeah, I'm very happy and glad it all worked out. Feel free to post whatever my email or contact info in there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have too.
Awesome. And then I'll post, I'll get that document from you for the evaluating associateships. And I'll post that as well, because you showed that to me a while ago and I forgot completely about it till now. So that was a awesome resource. So we'll have that for our listeners. So
perfect.
Cool. Thanks, Cameron.
All right, you bet. Hopefully, I got another video in the works. So hopefully
there we go. We'll post it concurrently. Soon. Tell me when your video comes out. We'll release the podcast.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
No problem. See you, man. Okay, so I loved the part of that story where Cameron was sitting in the living room with his partner Ryan and having to negotiate the price of the practice. The price was a little high. Did you feel like your reaction to me when we were talking about this was that might have been a lot to pay for a partnership?
Yeah, I felt like the practice was definitely a little higher than maybe he felt he wanted at the time, but also the growth of the practice was extremely high growth. And so I think for that case, maybe paying a higher percentage of collections for a high growth office isn't necessarily the worst thing.
Yeah. And for me, so he has since emailed me, he's reached out and shared some of the financial details, and he didn't want me to share them on the podcast. He did say, though, that I was allowed to say that he's making now 3 times what he was making as an associate. He seemed very happy with how he's doing right now.
I think I would be too.
Yeah, no, me too. It was one of those angsty moments for me that that would be awesome to be in a practice like that. So he bought into a massive stream of profit. And I
think his partner's production, sorry to cut you off, Richard, but his partners produce high dollar procedures. And so getting a portion of those profits for a high producing partner is definitely in Cameron's favor in this case.
Oh yeah. I mean, his partner really didn't need Cameron to buy him out. And I can't remember I don't think we went into this on the show. I met Ryan. I talked with his partner on the phone because he's making so much money that he doesn't have anywhere else to invest his money. So he was looking at whole life insurance. And I actually gave a presentation in dental school on the evils of whole life insurance and why I hate it as a product. And anyone who recommends it, if they're your financial advisor, I think that's a good time to switch financial advisors. I feel very strongly about it. So when Cameron found out that his partner was going to buy whole life insurance, he was like, I got to get Richard on the phone. So he got me to call Ryan and try and talk him out of buying whole life insurance. And by the end of it, his dad previously, Ryan's dad, had previously sold whole life insurance. So his dad was trying to talk him out of it. But we explored all the options. He's doing so well that he's like literally run out of places that he can put his money. And so whole life insurance is his best option. So he did not need to sell to Cameron. And that's kind of the partner you want. You want someone who wants to be your partner and it knows that they might even take a hit on their income. And in reality, I think Cameron's going to be okay. I think it's going to work out for both of them.
Absolutely.
Enough profit covers any minor mistakes in valuation when it comes down to it. So also one last thing, we put together that guide that Cameron mentioned, which was basically a list of questions for potential job opportunities. So you would ask these questions of the practice owner that you're looking at working at. I found that list super useful, had a lot of questions. Great starting place to find out if an associateship is right for you. The link to that will be in our show notes, as well as we'll be sending that out to any of our subscribers. So if you've subscribed or signed up for the email list in the past, you'll just get that to your email. So we'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices Podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Richard Lowe, and
I'm your co-host, George Hariri.
Okay, we'll talk to you next time. See ya.
I'm gonna prep some teeth. Only got 20 burrs in my burr block. I'm drilling, I'm feeling. Hand me the composite.
Now, walking to the lab like, what up? I got my bird block. I'm so pumped, I pepper tooth like a real doc. Decay in your teeth is so damn nasty. The dentist like,
Whoa, must've ate too much candy.
drilling in hella deep, that's a big cavity. Probably should've brushed your teeth, now it's a catastrophe. Starting at the top, make my way toward the lingo. Once you pop, you can't stop, like you're eating on a Pringle. Wait, what? Crisp. But shit, they were 99 cents. Drill it, fill it, and polish it. About to go and check the margin then. Passing through that floss again, making sure that it's hardening. It's dent shop, baby, won't confuse you with the jargon. Save you money, baby, and you're hella happy, that's a bargain trick. I'ma take your grandpa's crowns, I'ma take your grandpa's crowns. No, for real, ask your grandpa, can I have a silver crown? Oral exam showed a lot of teeth missing, plus some leftover roast beef that I found digging. You had a broken canine, I broke another canine. You trust me with a burr, I can't even draw a straight line. Hello, your teeth look yellow. Austin Powers ain't got nothing on your tooth decay, fellow. I can take some foil, make a grill like a homie. The rappers all will be like, nah, that dude's a phony.
I'm gonna prep